Do you remember your first time in Queally's?
I do, because I was kind enough to be brought here by Tom Mulligan and Mick O'Connor, two great musicians, great characters, and they were in the habit of coming back to Miltown after the Clare Fleadh, which was always a good place to go, because you were assured of music, and they had a lot of contacts with the Clare musicians going back, because Willie Clancy and Seán Reid and Martin Talty, they were frequently in Dublin, and they used to come up for the Oireachtas, and we would see them there, and Seán Reid in particular used to organise them. You'd see in the Oireachtas programme all the entries there from Shrine of Catharock, and there was quite a lot of them. J.C. Talty, Michael Falsey, Martin Talty, Willie, and Seán Reid himself, and I think Michael Crean towards the end, and Martin Roger. So they were a formidable force, and well respected. So I was down in Ennis, and I remember listening to Paddy Maloney playing the flute, and there wouldn't have been big crowds, but Tom Mulligan invited me to go with him. Tom was a very warm personality, and the rest of the family seemed to inherit that. But they brought me up here, and I was put up in this house, and remarkable people, and they were still talking about Seamus Ennis, who has spent some time here writing the tutor. I think he was commissioned by Seán Reid and the Clare County Board. Now, I don't know what happened to the tutor, but they all had a great time, and Tom Mulligan too, and Willie had come up, and they'd have great music, and it was an awful lot of fun. And Sean McGonagall was, he used to come down, he was staying here, I think, at the time with his wife Breed, and I used to be in that back room there. There's a room there, and they had a big Vortexian tape recorder, and I remember listening to some of the recordings. They had some of the last speakers of Irish out towards Ina, and I thought this was remarkable that there was two guys, ordinary guys, who would have left school early, and they saw the importance of that. And I knew that these were special people, and Martin Talty and Willie were doing that, and there was also recordings there of Charlie Mulvihill, and I remember listening to some of the tapes, and I can remember it was different music, an older form of music, and I'm delighted to see that that collection has gone into safe hands as well. So that's what was coming here, and the people, decent people, they wouldn't take money. Tom Queally in particular, I think he was related to Gareth Barry, but he loved music, and he was a great dancer. So that was the environment, and so I was just steeped to be in that company. And another year then, there was other members of the Pipers Club, Jim Crystal, who was in the photograph there hanging on the wall back there with Jimmy Ward, and Jim Crystal and Larry Dillon, they were staying in in Jimmy Ward's house. It might be called the Malbay, and I remember they bring me up to see St. Bridget's Well and all these things, but they were remarkably kind and encouraging to me. I was early out of school, and I was never down here before, and it was an eye-opener, and they treated you as an equal, and I never forget their kindness, and remarkable men.
Roughly what years are you talking here?
I might have been to late 50s, Liam, but I was only fumbling at it, probably still fumbling at it, but they were just very nice and indulgent. But they were, at the time they'd be talking, Clancy would be talking about Ennis and all, who was a walking repository of music and song and everything, and they all enjoyed this company.
What was it phrase or quote you have from the Clancy said about Ennis? You tell me once everything that man says.
Yeah, I was coming out of Dublin. I was collecting Willie. Glad you remember. I was collecting Willie. It was 1966, and I was bringing him down to Clare. I had a car before most people at the time, and I was going down to Clare, and I offered him a lift, and I arranged to meet him in O'Donoghue's pub. And as we were going out, Ennis had been playing, we were listening to him, and he said, everything that man says, sings and does should be recorded, because he was full of Shanachus music and singing, and he was at the centre of everything, so he was right. But Willie was equally full of all that, because his music he favoured was an older form of music, and he was steeped in it. But it was a mirror image of what was going on with Bobby Casey and the other lads, and his father before him. So that was here, and we were fortunate then to meet Patrick Kelly. So that was an older form of music, and it was in danger of being eclipsed, because there was a newer form of music coming on, and I was delighted to be involved. Seán, Keane and myself visited. We had occasion to visit because our girlfriends were from Bettystown, and so we were coming down on a regular basis, and we were able to we should go over to Willie, over to the Freels at the time, the people that owned it, and I could see Seán getting really into that, and he was developing this piping technique. Now, he never said anything, he just started to do it, because after about a quarter of an hour I leave the flute down, and I recognised, these people are in the class of their own, so it was great music. And I occurred to me I should record this, and I went looking for a good tape recorder, and Micheál O'Halloran had one, and but he was recording Seamus Ennis, and I said, well, no, that has to be done, because Ennis was he was into fast track, he was crashing cars and doing all sorts of things, and so I said Willie was relatively younger, but it wasn't to be. So my advice to people is do it now and then, and don't wait for some better equipment, because you mightn't get the opportunity.
Wise words. And reversing back up to we're speaking a lot about your experiences here in County Clare, but do you remember your early exposures to traditional music, and can you talk us through your journey towards learning the flute?
Yeah, well, it's a bit circuitous. I was involved in a band. I revived a band in the Scout band. The instruments were there, and with all the young boys, and I
it's in the Liberties, isn't it?
Yeah, in the Franciscans, they had a troop of Scouts, and there was a band that had become defunct, and the instruments were there, so I started to try to make my own way, and then I realised I went over to I joined a band, the Tionól pipe band. It was a very prestigious band at the time, but I was lucky in that I was favoured, and I got preferential treatment. The pipe major's band, Tim Keogh, he was a genius, and all his people played, and he was equally proficient on the fiddle and the uilleann pipes. He got lessons from piper Willie Andrews, and then the pipe major was similarly well endowed with musical skills. Tommy Moore, a Wexford man, but he had all the connections with all they used to go to Wexford Fesh, and all the people used to go to that, and he played also. He was an outstanding war piper, but he played the fiddle and uilleann pipes, and he used to he had a big influence on the Furies and the Keane, and so that was the atmosphere in the band. But they were the band of the Irish Citizen Army, and it was very historic, and some of the original members were involved in 1916, and so you were aware of that history. But I was the pipe major of the junior band, and they were all very much into competitions, but I'd saved up the money to go to Tionól for the piping, the World Championships, and I started going to the Pipers Club, and
Thomas Street,
and I was very there was very few young people, but I saw the Keane, Seán and James going, and I got friendly with them, and I was fooling around the whistle. But I decided, I got the money that I was saved to go to Dunoon. I bought a flute, one in Walton's yoke, terrible instrument to play, but it was the best thing I did. And I went around with the Keanes, and I went straight in at the deep end. They were child prodigies, and I had nothing. And I remember I was skipped hornpipes and jigs, went straight into reels, and I had a long playing record at the Tionól Céilí Band, and I was playing that. So I was in the fast lane, as Tony McMahon would say, and I never looked back, because they were remarkable musicians, and they didn't think about things, they played instinctively.
And in terms of, there was no formal classes at that time. Can you talk us through them with John Egan and other flute players you gravitated towards?
There was no one to teach. They used to teach the pipes in the Pipers Club, and I'm obsessive about pipes now. But if you went to Leo, you'd be playing marches and hymns and everything. And I was going around with the Keanes, and I wouldn't have been able for that. I got a taste of this excitement, and they were all vibrant and excitable lads. So I went down to Church Street. Was the Pipers Club? It was for pipers, and there's great sessions there. And but it was all group things, and I used to see Tom Mulligan, Mick O'Connor playing, and John Kelly, and they had a form of music I was drawn to. It was more individualistic. So, but I went down to Church Street down, and I found that I really enjoyed that, because the people who played there were mostly of Sligo, Leitrim and Roscommon background, but they played that style of music. And the MC there was John Egan, and the other guy used to play, the other flute player was John Brennan, and they played in the original Kincora band in the 1920s. So, and he had all that style. So, and they were all self-taught as well. So, what John invited me to do was to come down early when he opened up the Church Street. So I used to go down and he'd play a few tunes, and I'd play along with him. And that's really basically how I got going. And afterwards I got a recorder, and he played a few tunes, and I still have them. And he had a lovely, deliberate style. So that's... I was telling you, I asked him one day about who were the musicians he admired growing up, and he said, without hesitation, he said, when I heard John Gardner said playing, my head was staggering for days afterwards. I thought that was a fantastic description, yeah. And if you heard the recordings of John Joe, even when he was 82 playing the flute, it put you to shame, yeah.
Yeah, and the fiddle.
Yeah.
Can I ask, so you grew up in the Liberties, you've gone to pipe bands and the Tionól, or gravitated towards the flute. You're hanging around with the Keanes and started to make connections in County Clare as well. And
well, we got together. Well, we were in a band, an original band in Drimna, and I was invited to play with the Keanes, but they had some party in the way, so I because I was there with the Keanes, it broke up for a while, and then Seán, Keane and myself were playing. We used to go down to hear the Céilí bands at the Céilís. This one in Connergy's Hall in Parnell Square, and the Kincora band were playing, and Liam Rosen failed to show up, and they saw Seán, Keane and myself. We were probably the only two there. We went early to hear the music before all the jumping around started, and so Seán Céilí came down and asked us, could we go home and get the instruments and come up and play with them. And at that time, I lived there off the Coombe. You could get a bus and you'd be up. We were up and back in 20 minutes. I took my sister's fiddle, brought the flute. And apparently, according to the guy who was running it, had such an impact that he asked us, could we get a group to play. And it turned out it was the last time the Kincora played. So we asked Bridie Lavery to play with, and Benny the drummer, because you needed someone to tell you when to stop and how long to play for the dance. Benny was great. He had that. He was a lot older than us, and he was a very loyal and trustworthy. And Bridie loved the, you know, we were all young, and then I asked Michael Tubridy to play with us, and John Kelly. And John was, I think he had murder enthusiasm, and gave him a bit of a lift, because I was, a lot of people played at that time, particularly were older men, and he had repertoire tunes that were, I'd say, you know, that's nice. And it occurred to me a lot of these things that die with them. So I got a tune I'd either record it, and we'd try and put it together in selections, and we'd play them in the band, and I don't think we ever repeated a selection. And you'd play it on Queally House, and then I'd hear Nicky McAuliffe and all them playing it. So it was, you know, rejuvenating and putting these tunes back into circulation, which was probably the most important thing I did at the time. So, but I have to say, Seán Keane was great. I'd just go with him and put a few selections in, and we would rehearse a lot for that. So the band was very important for that, and the Oireachtas, we were competing, because Oireachtas happened in Dublin, and it was bigger than the All-Ireland. It appeared to me us to be more important, and it was convenient. And you'd meet the different bands. I remember we had a party then for the Kilfenora band and the Liverpool. Even though we were competing against them, and we'd come back to the club, and it was great camaraderie. And I remember even after someone went to a house that was recording, and was trying to give to Seamus Connolly himself, and Seán Keane, Bridie Laverty on the piano, and the drummer out of the Kilfenora band playing on the brushes. Beautiful.
So at what point did you start recording and collecting yourself?
Well, it was only just that I had the opportunity, and I don't think it was anyone else. There was one man started recording in Church Street, and a Dr. O'Byrne. But I had the opportunity to go around, and I even had a small portable one. I remember recording. I was driving Paddy Kaluri home. He started playing it, tuned me on the whistle, and I just put on the yoke. Because there, like, the Kaluris had music from another age. And we started coming down to Clare fairly often. And remember, there was lovely people in Ennis, Paddy Burns, and there was another man, O'Sullivan, and they'd give Seán and myself a lift down to Scariff for the Fleadh. And they'd look after us and get us back. Because there's no public transport of any description we were aware of. But I remember standing at they had a thing for the bands, and we were watching the Russells playing. And then we saw the Kaluris. And wild men and wild music, and that made such an impact, because these were significant musicians that had a separate repertoire. And that's all gone. So I think we were lucky to see that, and experiences. So I was thankful for that.
But around that time, like, you would have interviewed and recorded from Patrick Kelly. I remember you later recording the Kaluris, and when did you actively seek out to interview and record people?
Well, I was going there, and particularly when I went with Seán, we'd play a few tunes, and then I'd stop playing, and I'd want to record, because let Seán and Patrick play, and sometimes I went on my own and recorded them. But Patrick was I was always interested in the history too. But one day Patrick wasn't well. It was mostly we were playing music. But I interviewed him, and he started telling me all about the Maloney brothers who made the pipes. And he knew of them, you know, I don't know if he knew them, but he had all information. And I got very little music that day, but it was probably the best interview I did. I think I might have given him a copy here to Murrish. I remember doing that. So he might have had it in Oireachtas, Clare, but it was Patrick talking about his father and the music and the other musicians. And I remember one fellow had nicknames like Schooner Brain. And you know that Tommy and O'Day, he had a photograph of him. Huge man, big knees, and he was a flute player, but he was playing the fiddle at this stage. And so I was interested that he was an intelligent man, Patrick. He was and he was interesting in lots of aspects, you know. And one Christmas, he knew I used to come down regularly, and I said I was coming down, and he asked, would I bring Willie, and I said I would, and he said, would I bring Jimmy Ward, because Jimmy was a great character and lovely man. And we got a great tune off of Jimmy too that he gave me on the whistle. He played mostly over the banjo, but he was from Kilfenora. You know that tune? Yeah, da di diddle da 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 da. Now there was no one playing it in Kilfenora at that time, but we got that and we broadcast it back into the repertoire. So, but I went down there and I took that photograph that they used for years of Willie with the cap. That was in Patrick Kelly's house. I think it was 1972.
The photos that's used for the Scoil Samhraidh here.
Yeah. So I was very privileged to meet these, but there wasn't many other people going to him. That was the pity, because he had so much to give, and it was deemed to be old-fashioned, and he felt that too.
Some of the other things you got involved in then. You didn't have an opportunity to go to sign up for classes in a formal context yourself, but you were involved with Seamus McLoona in setting up.
Yeah, Seamus is a great man, and he was his enthusiasm was infectious, and he was. I remember trying to get pressure to get him employed as a timberer, and I'd have to say I succeeded. So he was appointed in 1969 or 68. But he set up a Fleadh Cheoil, and he had Liam O'Flynn and Seán, Keane and myself. But I persisted. I stayed on. But we were involved. I remember Seán, Keane and myself. We were briefly involved with the Gaeilge Cabaret, and the manager was a Len Clifford. He was a great character, and he afterwards wound up as a judge. But I remember saying to him, why don't you follow up with your success of the 78 recordings of Joe Burke and Paddy Kenny? And he said to me, just like that, Mick, if you get the artists, I'll do the rest. So I just couldn't believe it. So I went back to Seamus and said, look, this man has offered to, he's just looking for a list and he'll take care of it. So we made a list, and because he was working for Cultus, it was good for him to be doing that. But we had to say, and we had Willie Clancy and Seamus Ennis and Joe Heaney and Seán O'Connor, John Kelly and 007 and John Gant. It was like a who's who. And there again, when I look back on that, I was saying, geez, I was so lucky. Whereas if you gave that to a committee, you would have had lessers. But Seamus and myself didn't hesitate. There was no discussion. We just laid it out, and fair play to Len. He delivered on it, and it's superb.
That's the show, the Ceoil, isn't it?
Yeah, show the Ceoil. 1 and 2, yeah. Mm. I was fortunate growing up in the Liberties too, that people like Tommy Reck were they were neighbours, and Tommy Potts, if Tommy was going by on his bicycle, my sister used to play. Seán Keane taught her, and she played the concertina, which was very few people playing at the time. And if he heard her playing, he'd get off his bicycle to come in, and he knew my mother and my uncles. He went to school with them, so she was able to handle him, because he could be a bit jumpy at times, but he really wanted to hear himself played back on. I had a tape recorder, big Vortexian, like what they had here in Clare. And I got it in an auction, but it was very good quality. And he wanted to hear himself played back. And when you think of it now, if you take out the tape recorder, people run from you. So that's what he wanted, because he was critical of himself. But I was so fortunate to meet these people. And Tommy Reck was playing at the Abbey Tavern. And there was very few musicians, and there was very few young people. I have to keep emphasising that, because even in Church Street there was only 4 flute players that I was aware of, like Seamus McMahon, Cathal McConnell, Tansy, and I said, that's all. Now there must have been more, but I wasn't aware of them. But Tommy came to my door one day and asked me, when I come out to the Abbey Tavern, they were going, was a tour of Canada, and they wanted another team. So I went out, and I was playing with Joe Leary, used to play with Joe Cooley, and then some changes there. So they asked me whether I'm going to recommend anyone else, so I brought Seán Keane and Michael Tuberty. We were the B team. We just laughed at that, but we had a good time, and it was Tommy Reck, and he was like a father to me musically, and he was a lovely man, modest guy. He could play the fiddle as well, not many people were aware of it. So I was very fortunate, and you would be, because there was a certain, you had an entree like Dan O'Dowd, and he was from the Liberties too, and remember Paddy Bond, you would be, they would be friendly to you. Maybe there wasn't many other people around, but I remember Paddy told me, you could come up to the house in, you lived beside the park. He was having Tommy Reck, and it was a great performance. Tommy didn't play out much, and it was going to be a big thing, and we were all going up. And I went up my bicycle, and I was in school, but there was no one there. And then I waited around, and then I saw this crowd coming out of Cummock's pub, and they were going one side of the road to the other with parcels of stout. And so they were there, they were all Sonny Brogan and Bill Hart, and they were all, and the O'Reillys and Kieran and Owen, and all great musicians. And I went in, and Tommy was there too, but Tommy played immaculate, and he had great encouragement from me, and Sean Potts. But while I'm at it just shows you it wasn't all about me. It was great characters and great people. But I remember Sonny got up to shake hands. He'd been introduced to Paddy Bond's wife, and he fell back into the fireplace. And it was so funny. And then there was a big queue up to the toilets, and there was a problem. And then Paddy was great, and he come down and said, "I know what to do." He said. A neighbour, he told me I could get a ladder anytime I wanted, and I got around the back, and we got up the back window, and we opened the toilet door. So he brought me, and I was the only young person, probably the only one that wasn't drinking. And we went around, but Paddy was going into some neighbour's garden, and there was these glass cloches for forcing lettuce, and they banging and crashing these yolks, and then the ladder was beside the great house, and with the ladder, it was like the Keystone Cops, you were banging and crashing and the ladder, and then the light went on upstairs, and the curtain opened. There was this old guy with his nightshirt and a shotgun, and just I nearly wet myself. And who goes there? And Paddy says, "That's me, it's Paddy Bard." He says, "You told me I could take a ladder anytime I liked." But that was it. When we got back, Sean Potts had screwed off the lock and got it. But they're the things I remember. They were great characters, and I was so lucky to be in their company.
Let me see. So you were speaking about respect there to Tommy Potts as well.
Yeah.
Had you conversations with him about sharing his talents and him being a religious man, and someone perhaps who was reluctant to release the Liffey Banks at the time?
Oh yeah, I worked with people with disabilities, and we used to have a Christmas party, and the Chieftains came along one year, and they brought Tommy Potts, and we used to have these people at the Abbey Tavern crowd. They'd all come along and play, and Potts he just had recorded the LP, the Liffey Banks, and when he came, he must have been with the boys, and Paddy came up to see, "Would you have a word with Tommy?" He says he's thinking of withdrawing the LP because he played a C natural set of C sharp, and Tommy can be very religious and very definite about things. So, but he played the solo, and there was no one listening. We were all jumping around, and I looked at him, and the tears were running down his eyes, because a lot of people were, they had severe disabilities and all, but it affected them, and there was no more talk about the thing, about withdrawing the thing. So I'd like to think I might have helped dispel the idea, because we would have been much the poorer without his contributions.
Do you remember conversations walking home with him from Church Street? Or
Yeah. I used to go to the clubs, and they were very exciting, and you'd hear new tunes, and you'd be going around your head, and I had great company as well. We often walked home with the Keanes and Des Gertie and my best man Dermot Dignam, and the conversation, they'd be talking about politics and music, and the conversation was so exciting, and that I'd pass my own house and walk up to Drimnagh with them and come back myself, because they were so stimulating. But on occasion I walked home with Tommy Potts, and the thing was, he'd be talking to me about Jaffa Hyphus and these other musicians and Isaac Stern. And you know, I didn't know who he was talking about, but he was talking to me as an equal. And I'd have to go home and ask my mother or someone that might have some clue. But he had all sorts of. At that time, Radio Ireland was modelled on the BBC, so they had high standards, and with scarce resources. So the ordinary people they had a programme. They listened to plays, and patrician music and light opera, and that was brought home to me. We started, Seán, Keane and myself, we listened to Fitz Chrysler, and and I remember my mother was aware of those things. They knew she played the piano, and probably got the music from that side of the family, because during COVID I was able to trace a few generations and going back, but she just loved it. But Potts would have been the same. They weren't just listening to traditional music, because like his brother Eddie played. He won the pipes and the fiddle and the Fleadh Cheoil and all, but he played in a jazz band. He was self-taught, played the saxophone, but it was a way of living. I was a young family, so there was improvisations where I could see that, like with Potts, and even with Seán Potts, I could see that coming down. Seán was a great whistle player too, I have to give testimony. There was no one like him, and he stands out. Like, I remember a 5-part version of Craig's Pipes. There was nothing like it, and he had this lovely playing and syncopation that was there, and Tommy had an element of that. But when I came down to Clare, Clancy and Bobby Casey and all, Joe Ryan and John Kelly, they were all known to us, and so when we came down here, and with the broadcast we did with the Castle, these people got a great welcome. And Potts used to come down here, and he used to stay with Peter O'Loughlin, and he told me himself that the people down here, he felt a kinship with them, that he admired his music, whereas in Dublin I could see that people didn't know what was going on half the time. Now, they gave him respect, but down here there was a veneration, respect. So that was the difference, and he enjoyed coming down here. I know that, and I met him down here.
You travelled as well to other places. You went up to Donegal to hear Doherty, and to Fred Finn and Peter Horan, Tansy. You were
I was with
Seán.
I was with Seán Keane. They invited me down to La Valla, where the Keanes come from, and we stayed there for a few days. But there was lots of things going on about 10 miles away. But unless you had a way of going there, it was no use. And I remember saying, "When's the next bus?" What bus? There was no transport. And but I remember Sean's aunt, baby they called her. She was working hard, feeding animals and things. But I knew she played the concertina, and I asked her to play, and she played a lovely version of the 5 Mile Chase with a lovely long D in it, and beautiful. And they all played. There was another Uncle Mick. He was a policeman, and he had an accordion that belonged to the Bellhavel trio. So extraordinary people. That was on the father's side. But then Tansy invited us up to his house up in Sligo, because I have to say this, when Tansy came on the scene, there was nothing like him. An extraordinary musician. And he was broadcasting and recording, and he came up to Dublin, and he was related to Mrs. Harrington and the Kincora band, and he was stunned us all with his brilliance, you know. So, and then, you know, I said there was very few young people, so he invited us up, so we hitched up. I think we slept on the beach or something in Galway, and we got a lift up, and we were with him, and we met all the old guys. Because even when we came to Clare, with Seán and myself, we went into Ennis, we met Paddy Kenny and Peter O'Loughlin. They were always very encouraging, but same with Patrick Kelly, they were very impressed with Seán's genius, and that's all I can say it was. And they hadn't met anything like that, because there was nothing coming up. And even when we were down in Longford, there was good musicians, but there's no one coming after them. But when we were down here, we'd play Sligo tunes for them, because they still had a small enough repertoire. And then we went up to Sligo, we were playing Clare tunes. So we just, and that's what they wanted to hear, something different. But I remember the guys that were there, Dick Brennan, the Hunts, and these were all guys who recorded 78s. And Tansy was the only young musician. Although he brought us in to hear the Grahams, two young girls played. But there was no one else we were aware of playing. So.
Yeah. Would you speak to us about publications you were involved in over the years? So, in a professional capacity, as a printer and someone managing people with disabilities, and how you managed to encourage certain publications along?
I meant to mention Fred Finn and Peter Horton, who were extraordinary, and they're so welcoming. And you know, we used to meet them, and they were great fellas. And even though there was a big age gap, they were always delighted to meet them. They were like Ben and Charlie Lennon. You know, you have to go to Fleadh, we'd have to meet them. I played the same tunes, but it was just the you know, we felt a kinship with them, that with a connection, that they were great. And Fred and Peter were like that. And one day they just gave me the type of characters where we met them at a function. It was a dinner for Church Street Club. They were having a dinner, and they appeared, and they had some American with them, Yank, they said. And then they were going to Killarney the next day, and they were disappointed that Seán, Keane and myself just couldn't go off with them. Like, they left small farms of cows and all that, they went off, but they were great characters. Right up to the very end, yeah.
Were you involved in getting, with Seamus getting that?
Yeah, to put out I did a lot of publications now. Scoil Sligo. I designed that and print. I designed and printed lots of books and CDs, not LPs at the time, and people came to me because I knew Colm O'Loughlin, the man who collected all the great ballads, and his son, one taught me in college, and Darragh O'Loughlin, and the other son was in my class, and I liked Colm O'Loughlin. If people came to me with a book, I'd read the book, and I'd have a flavour of what it was, and I'd try and design the cover. Like the guy who came to me about the Irish dancing, Dr.
John
Cullinane. I said to him, I could envision a series and have covers, but similar but related, you know. And I did that. I did something like 7 publications, and I gave them, when I was finished, a lot in a slipcase as a presentation. So that was what Colm O'Loughlin would read a book, and he would have a personal imprint into it. So most other printers don't. They don't. It's your job to read, you know.
You talked about Charlie Lennon's his compositions.
Yeah, well, I was privileged to play with Charlie, and he was with the Liverpool band. We used to see them be playing against in a competition. But Charlie, he came back to Dublin, and his kids were in the Clontarf Club, and we were our lads were in it as well. But we did a recording with the Abbey Tavern, and Paddy Clacken said, yes, you must have been rehearsing. And it wasn't, it was just that the style we'd have, dam, da 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 da, staccato thing. But for years I was playing with all the Clare lads. When I started playing with Charlie again was all this Sligo Leitrim stuff, so Clacken suggested we do a record, and forget how it came about, but we did that, lucky enough, so. And then after that, Seamus McMahon was on it, and we did a duet, and we were going like the hammers of hell on it, and someone was saying might be a bit too fast, so someone suggested we sent it down to Frankie Gavin and see what he thought. Gavin wrote back, put it on track 1, he said. So we were looking for restraint, we were going to the wrong man, but it was good fun, and we were. I'm delighted I met him, not even recording was a bonus. Yeah.
You encouraged Charlie to publish his own compositions too? Yeah,
it came about, Charlie was, he told me he was asked to review a book, and some of his compositions were in it, and they weren't attributed to him. So I said, there's only one thing to do about that, is you'll have to publish your own. And he started to write each day, and going into on the dart, he'd write out a tune and give it to me in the Abbey Tavern when he met me. And I had only one condition. I said, Charlie, this has to be the best. You have the best design, and we have to do it in the best quality, and everything in it. I got an artist doing drawings. I got the best photographer in town to do the cover photograph. And so I think I lived up to that in the first thing. So I was very proud to be involved in that.
Doctors about John Dwyer and hiding his compositions from me.
Well, I think you were aware. You were asking me once, John Dwyer has any compositions? I thought, I know he has, but you have to have some evidence before you can propose someone for a teaching card award. So there was no evidence that we were aware of. So I got on to his daughter, Karen, and I said, is there any chance we could organise something? And how we go? I said, could you ask them to record a few tunes for his grandchildren? And that's where he had a cassette that came back, and I gave it to you, and it went, and that's how it was. He got it, and then it inspired him to start writing them down. So they were. That has been saved, but he was such a modest man. For all the years we were playing with him, thinking, well, he never. He didn't suggest that he recorded them. We just didn't know. But that type of modesty wasn't uncommon. Michael Tubridy's the same. He's such a modest person and such an assuming guy. And they were all, you go a long way before you meet two people as nice as Michael Tubridy and John Dwyer.
Last two questions. Your involvement in the school here over the years, can you some observations of how you've seen the school develop over the years and what you think is important about the school?
Well, what I think is important about it is the piping dimension, because that's initially what it was set up. Willie was to be head of us here, but that was the centre of the school. It revolved around him, and I think it has done that. And I was at a lot of recitals, and I was involved in the whistle and flute, and from my own experience, it was the highest standard ever, and that pleased me. But the next night, the piping was never heard anything as good. I was a young American player there, Michael Stribling. He was just astounding. And what's different about it is that he's playing all the old music. He's all doing all these intricate triplets that Andy Conroy and all spent his whole life analysing. And so that gives me great encouragement, and so that's coming on. Now, the other things, other instruments that are coming in, they could dilute from it in some way, but the main thing has to be the pipes. I think that should get primacy, and because it's our national instrument, and it's what's unique about the school here with Willie, and that's how I'd like to see it continue. Another thing I'm very happy about is that the standard, you see the programme, it's chock-a-block with quality recitals and lectures. music without analysis or critique is useless to me, you know. But I think people doing research and all that, and it gives. It's really so important what you're doing here now. So that's part of the school. It doesn't go on elsewhere, as far as I'm aware. So I'm very happy with all that.
If you were to come back from wherever we're all going in 100 years' time, and what would you like to see traditional music in a broader sense in Ireland? How do you...
Well, I'd like to see the central stream, like say the pipes, fiddle, and the instruments, because that's what we set up. This was supposed to be the Scoil Ėigse, the first one, and it didn't work out. Cultus were involved with Brendan Bronick. Now, Brendan was he was a neighbour of mine, and he was a great man, and gave me access to recordings, and very indulgent to me. And it got me interested in recording myself, but he was such a towering figure. You wouldn't, you know, he was the authority. But on my own way, I started doing bits of things and started taping things and cataloguing them. But I think the central team, you know, there's probably people, it's developing, which it should develop, it can't remain static, but I'd like to see the central team of the music, the central, you know, the instruments, and people want to move away very fast without mastering what's there. I mean, there's people, it's great to see people going into, like with that Michael Stribling and Seán McKeown, they're able to do. I was saying to Seán McKeown one day, I knew Tommy Wreck well and Seamus Ennis, but what you're doing is at that level, and you go ahead with what you're doing, because he has mastered that. So he can move away, and he knows where he's going. He won't disrespect it. But a lot of people are just getting the very basics, and they're diluting with a lot of other things. But I think if they get the opportunity and mentoring, they will see the intricacies of what's there, because it's great to master that and move on. It has to, and then when people are confident with what they have, they feel secure, and they can have other collaborations, and that's good too. You know, the people like Liam O'Flynn and Paddy Glacken, and even yourself, you're able to do it because you won't be compromising on your own integrity.